Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the March 7th, 2024 Baltimore City Planning Commission meeting. I'm Sean Davis. The pleasure of chairing this commission. Sitting to my right is Chris Ryer, Director of Planning and Secretary for the Commission. Mr. Secretary, will you call roll?
Robin Allen.
Present.
Marcia Collins.
Present.
The Honorable Eric Costello.
Present and accounted for.
Lee Porn.
Present.
Claudia Jolin.
Present.
Douglas McCoach.
Present.
Justin Williams just arrived. Eric Stevenson.
Present.
And Sean Davis.
Present. Our first order of business is to recognize an incredible guy. Mr. French, would you please stand, come forward? On behalf of the Planning Commission, we offer you this certificate of recognition signed by the mayor, recognizing your 21 years of service to the planning department. Longer, I think, with the city. How long have you been with this?
Well, no.
No?
A little bit longer with
the city.
staff, but no, not the city, housing authority.
Oh, that's right, that's right. Forgive me. So thank you very much for your dedicated service. I'm going to miss you. I'm going to miss your wonderful demeanor, your wonderful presentations. It's greatly appreciated.
Thank you so much. I just want to say a quick word, my daughter graduated in 2011 from high school, and as parents went to the commencement ceremony, and the principal gave what I considered a rather stern speech to the graduates. Basically, the message was, your purpose in life is not to have fun. Your purpose in life is to be useful. And I've been fortunate enough in this job, in this position, to have a position that allowed me to have fun while being useful. And I thank you all for your part in making that possible. Thank you again.
Very much.
Appreciate this.
I was a little worried that you were going to give us a stern recognition. God knows we need them. All right. The next order of business is our next meeting is March 28th, which is also opening day.
Every year.
Our meetings, as you know, typically start at 1 p.m. Game time starts at 3:05. I'm recommending that we move our start time up to 12 to noon. And I've asked Eric to manage the agenda so that ideally we can be in and out in a couple hours, and so everybody can get to pregame festivities and whatnot.
So this would be the fun and not the stern part.
That's correct. This would be the fun, not the useful part.
first.
So is everybody okay with that?
Fine.
Okay, I think I need an official motion.
So moved.
Second,
Second.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Great, it's officially done. You have before you our meeting minutes for our February 22nd, 2023 meeting. Are there any questions or comments regarding those? Hearing none, do I have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Thank you,
Second.
Vice Chair Stevenson. Thank you, Commissioner Collins. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Moving on to our consent agenda, we have CIP transfers from the Board of Estimates meeting on March 6th. There were 5 items. Any questions or comments regarding these?
I do have one question, Mr.
Please.
Chair. Item number 5.
I saw the same.
So thank you, staff, for flagging this as not consistent. It's a significant transfer, that affects the geographic distribution of our investments. I'm just wondering if there's any sort of justification.
So for those who are not looking at the CIP transfers, the Department of Transportation is transferring $7,095,000 from a series of accounts over to the Central Avenue Phase 2 improvements. It says this transfer will partially fund costs for extra work and credits for additional and eliminated work and other costs associated with change order number 9. the Central Avenue Streetscape and Harbor Point Connector Bridge. The note says this is not consistent with the CIP. This will reduce the improvements to Midtown Mount Royal and reduce the amount of resurfacing in the southwest, southeast, and northwest sectors. Ms. Ahern, might you have any comments?
Just a bit of additional context that I was able to get from the agency in anticipation of this question. The Mount Royal.
Without even a prompt, that's great.
The Mount Royal construction project was completed in 2019, so that particular source of funding is from a completed project. It is a significant amount,
That's
just
4.7 million of the,
is,
it was completed and there's a $4.7 million delta? Wow, we need more contracts like that.
Throw them a party.
regarding the project to which the funds are going, they stated that this is the last change order for Central Avenue, and the project is now complete. The change order includes rescoping protected bike lane from a two-way bike lane, bike racks, and a global settlement for extending engineer's office lease for the extended contract duration, conduit redesign, storm drain, and other accumulated issues from the start of the contracts to finish.
Can I ask a question, Kristen?
Yes.
Is your microphone on?
On top of our last planning commission CIP modification, which they requested funds from paving across the city to cover the Colgate Bridge modifications. Is there any money left to pave streets? I mean,
I think that's a fair question. I can look into the total remaining. Last year, we did approve a significant allocation of ARPA funds for street repaving. So those funds are available, are not part of this or that transfer from last week. Otherwise, I'd have to probably invite the agency in to provide more detail. I can go back and research what's left in terms of the accounting, but in terms of the reasons behind the change orders and the necessity of them and the reason they have to do this transfer, I'd probably need to defer to the agency for more detail.
So this work is done on Central Avenue.
That's my understanding.
And so the bill is due, which is a bit of a shame that this stuff doesn't happen pre, it happens post. So I don't know what position we're in other than putting a contractor in a tenable position. So are there any other questions or comments regarding? If not, unfortunately, do I have a motion? For the love of God, somebody give me a motion.
Move to approve.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Really? Any abstentions? All right. Minor change, final design approval, plan unit development, PUD number 19 for the Northwest Plaza in the 5th District. Some signs and entrances to an existing building. Any questions or comments regarding this? If not, do I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Commissioner Horn. Second?
Second.
Thank you, Vice Chair Stevenson. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Finally, on the consent agenda, minor change, revised signage, Belvedere Square, plan unit development, PUD number 12, 5911 York Road in the 4th District. It's a new sign in an existing building. Any questions or comments regarding this? Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Thank you, Vice Chair Stevenson. Second?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Horn. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Moving on to our regular agenda, Mr. Secretary.
First item on the regular agenda is the FY 25 through 30 Capital Improvement Program recommendations and vote. Kristen Ahern will present.
And we're up.
All right, good afternoon, Commissioners. Today I'm presenting the recommendations for the fiscal 25 to 30 capital improvement program for your vote to forward the recommendations to the Board of Estimates. Each year, we prepare a 6-year program, the first year of which becomes the capital budget for the city, and we start again each year. Per BOE policy, a capital improvement is a physical betterment or improvement and related studies. It is not improvements costing less than $50,000 or vehicles or repairs or maintenance. About, I think, 8 major city agencies participate, plus the school system. And we are at a point in the process where you vote on the set of recommendations before this goes through a series of formal approvals at the Board of Finance, Board of Estimates, and City Council. I'd just like to remind you that while typically we allow agencies to submit requests that exceed what we believe we'll be able to fund, this year we gave them limits that are approximately in line with what we were able to fund. And so the number of changes to the recommendations is less, there are fewer changes than you have seen in previous years. Just to go back a little, one idea behind that is to work toward preparing an unconstrained plan where we have more visibility into the entire universe of potential projects that we could fund as a city and understand what agencies are prioritizing among all of the projects that they could choose to do. There's a lot of uncertainty in future funding this year, also a lot of optimism. So you all approved the next loan authorization for the 2024 general election to ask voters to authorize the city to issue up to $125 million in debt, in GO bond debt, for the next 2 fiscal years, 26 and 27. And then our 6-year recommendations show that amount increasing to $140 million in fiscals 28 and 29, and then again to $170 million in fiscal 30. That will be subject to the Board of Finance and the Department of Finance's review of the city's ability to pay debt service. So we might not get to those top level amounts in each of those years, but our recommendations show what we could do if we were to get to those investment levels. This is how those GO bonds break down. You can see we've shown a focus on infrastructure and achieving a state of good repair for our infrastructure in the increase in GO bonds. So that line increases the most dramatically, with increases for affordable housing and schools. We did recommend reducing the amount for community and economic development in fiscals 28 to 30, with the idea that funding from the Mayor's Vacancy Initiative would fund the projects that would otherwise need to be funded with these GO bonds, plus some. And then finally, highway user revenue has been somewhat volatile. In 22, the General Assembly passed House Bill 1187 to increase the amount of highway user revenue that comes to local jurisdictions with the sunset in fiscal 2027. The governor this year proposed cutting that to restore it for 1 year only. And so there's a lot of uncertainty around what will happen next year, but we've chosen to reflect in our recommendations an amount consistent with House Bill 1187. On the screen, I'm showing you a breakdown of our recommendations by agency and fund source. We've focused on local sources versus other, local being the GO bonds, highway user revenue, general fund PAYGO, and some small other amounts dedicated by the Department of Finance this year that kind of fall more under local discretion. So you can see the Department of Transportation has the highest allocation this year of both local and other sources, reflecting the increase in highway user revenue, as well as the significant number of assets that they maintain for the city. Department of Housing is also one of the higher budgets recommended this year. And then the school system with $19 million from the city. I just want to note that the capital budget only reflects the city's contribution to the school system. The majority of their funding comes from the state. and that's not reflected here. Just another view across all 6 years of our investments or our recommendations for investment by agency. You can see the amounts ramping up across the years. I'll note that the mayoralty line includes what's basically a placeholder for state of good repair cycle, where we hope to aim to, in the future, have data on which to base planning for a state of good repair. So we would establish a replacement cycle for things like traffic lights and ADA ramps and roofs and HVACs and other items that we could proactively maintain. To break down the recommendations by source of funding, you can see how we have, we have significant state and federal funds in the recommendations for the year. The utility-related sources are always the vast majority of our capital budget. So while it looks very large, most of that funding, typically around 2/3, has to go back into the water, wastewater, and stormwater utilities. And then you can see the general funding, or we've termed local discretionary funding, ramp up over the years with the increase in GO bonds and highway user revenue. Just to present another view of the breakdown by source, you can see the state and federal sources in the yellow, the highway user revenue in red, those other local, more discretionary sources in green, and the utility sources in blue. We've taken a look at the allocations by geography and by demographics based on the recommendations presented 2 weeks ago. So I have noted that this is a draft and this hasn't been updated based on the changes we made for the vote today. But this is an analysis that we will go back and adjust and provide to the city council per the 2018 legislation that requires us to report on how dollars are advocated across certain demographics. So the top 3 geographies in terms of investment, we sort of focus on the non-DPW investments. Oops, sorry, I was going backwards. The top 3 geographies in terms of investment were downtown Seton Hall, Cherry Hill, and Lakeland, Westport, Mount Winans, and Lakeland. And this likely is due to large investments in things like the Hanover Street Bridge. There were 2 bridges on Hanover Street that we were able to allocate significant funding toward this year, as well as the significant state or federal resources that are going into the Middle Branch Resilience Initiative in that geography. So the Westport and downtown geographies are represented by that pink wedge. They're in that quartile, which is why that is sort of an outsized part of the total investment this year. And then in this chart, they're represented in Westport, I believe, is represented in the blue bar, Cherry Hill in the dark burgundy, and then downtown is obviously one of the higher income areas of the city. And we repeat the analysis for DPW investments. We have heard your feedback that we want to dig a little deeper into looking at the folks who the different investments may be serving rather than necessarily just the geography. And we've been starting internal conversations about how to do that and hope to maybe start to push that a bit further starting this summer and see how we might reconsider this analysis to go even deeper and give us better insight into the decisions that we're making. With that, we recommend approval of the fiscal 2025 to 2030 capital improvement program.
Thank you very much, Kristen, First, thank you, and Sarah and the entire team for everything that you do this time of year. I know it's a lot of work. Obviously, there's a lot of great things that are happening in the formatting and with the software to help us tie us down. I also want to thank you for a really comprehensive staff report, which I think also kind of lays things out for future years and what we can be looking for. So it's going to be a good roadmap for 26 and beyond. Do we have any questions or comments from the commission, starting off with Commissioner Jolin?
No questions, thank you.
Commissioner Allen? Commissioner Horn?
No questions.
Vice Chair Stevenson?
I just want to say thank you and great job. I feel, really informed, more so each year, but this year has been really good. So thank you. A couple comments for next year as we constantly seek to improve. And I want to ask these questions now because, I was going to kid with you when I came in that I had like a bunch of comments and changes that I wanted to see, but I would, not do that to you now. But, we just have to start so early if we really want to have an impact on this. And so it's one of the things that I would like to see for next year is an understanding of the balances in these reserve accounts. Because that's something that we see a lot on the CIP transfers. Money's coming from a reserve account. Well, how much money is in these reserve accounts would really could inform, how much new money we're allocating to agencies each year. It's another theme seems to be, last year when we supplemented with ARPA, a lot of, because we were spending ARPA money, other money didn't get spent. So it seems like a lot of that money is kind of slushy, unaccounted for right now.
Waiting in limbo?
Yeah, I would love to see an accounting of that as we're allocating our limited resources. And then just lastly, and this is kind of just an opinion thing, and maybe you already do this behind the scenes, but I think it would be really cool to see some sort of competitive process, for lack of a better word, because we have this scarcity mindset where there's always more projects to do than there is money, and we just have to kind of, settle that these are the best ones for this year. But if it was, if it was $10 million, or if it was even $1 million, or any amount of money that agencies had to compete for, and whether it was, based on whoever's project had the best equity, or whoever's project had the best, whatever it is, some of these things that we want to see in all of the proposals. But, it could be a way for, more community engagement if it was something that the public voted on, or, maybe it's just a way for me to feel like we have a little bit more, choice in the projects that we're picking. But that was just, a thought that I wanted to share with you. But so overall, again, just thank you. It gets better every year. Great job.
Deputy Mayor Williams?
No questions, and also to share the chair's sentiment and appreciation for all the work that goes into this.
Commissioner McCoach?
You have a couple brief comments, which I actually sent to Kristen earlier. And I just wanted to thank the team for their work on the CIP, in particular, the summary of the adjustments. I think the analysis goes a long way to illustrate how funds are used and sometimes not used. I think overall the budget does an excellent job of allocating scarce resources equitably to address city priorities. Over the life of this budget, your recommendations will help the city reallocate hundreds of millions of dollars more effectively with the changes that you've identified. That's great. We could wish that the city had tools to enable individual agencies to track these capital flows, but we're assured by the city charter that the Department of Planning has the authority and the ability to do this. So I appreciate the summary spreadsheet tracking both changes and justifications. It's really helpful to the budget requests. Through this document, we can see a significant quantity of unspent funding accounted for and allocate it to more productive uses. My only other recommendation was considering how your allocation mapping can more accurately illustrate the CIP distributions and their impact on city communities. But on the whole, it was a really comprehensive and well-explained document, so thank you.
Commissioner Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I really respect the staff that works on this every year. Anytime I've had a question, it's always been responded to in a very short order. In reference to some of the Vice Chair's comments, one possibility would be to bring in various agencies and have them explain how they go through their prioritization projects process so that we as an entity have a better understanding. I know how my department goes through it, but I don't know how the others do. And I think that by understanding the prioritization process, you get a sense of how agencies work within a capital project that isn't of the size they really want. So you have to make hard choices. And sometimes we make changes here in this group. So I would just make that as a suggestion if we could. That would have to be very early on in the process. But overall, I just want to thank the wonderful staff here at Planning. Thank you.
Councilman Costello. Any
No comments,
questions?
thank you.
So I'll just wrap it up. It's going to be really interesting to see how the adaptive planning and the workday interface comes together. In your memo, you had talked about a 6-month process. Is it 6 months from like now? So should we be looking for that integration and happening? And I'm seeing a big smile, so maybe it's already happened.
That's my wildly ambitious hope.
Okay, all right. Because as we all know, it's garbage in, garbage out kind of a thing. So obviously you got to correct all the numbers, but that I think could have a really major play in especially the CIP transfers and how we look at those. In regards to Vice Chair Stevenson and Commissioner Collins, I think it's going to be great to see when BCRP comes in next year and you say, okay, now you've got this master plan, and the master plan should be providing you with the roadmap of exactly what you're providing. If that goes well, then maybe every agency should have a master plan. Specifically in your memo on the first page, don't pull it up, it talks about the disposition of property. Did you see your look? Like, what the hell are you talking about? On the first page of your memo, you talk about the disposition of city-owned property and how that can, and you identified it here, the mayor's vacancy initiative. I can't tell you how much I would wish we could just expedite that disposition process as quickly as possible. Let's just go through, rip off the Band-Aid, identify all the properties that we don't need, sell them tomorrow for whatever we can get for them, and just get them back into private hands where we can tax them, right? So I don't think that's necessarily a comment, but if you want to.
Well, I can respond, because I know you were involved with this 2 or 3 years ago, but we have been working very closely with DGS and the mayor's office. Turned out to be a lot more complicated than we thought, especially post-COVID. The workforce needs are changing rather drastically. So Ernst & Young is under contract now to help us go through that process. I think it'll be about a 6-month process, and I hope we will have
Is that a Chris Aaron 6-month process, or is that a?
I actually don't know the timeline of the contract, but 6 months is a typical amount. And it'll be a pretty comprehensive look at the downtown campus. I know the CAO is very interested in this. So I think it will give us a really good roadmap going forward for the downtown campus. And it will include the analysis of how city public leases can improve the private sector and the tax base. So that piece will be added onto that.
Good. I mean, I think there's 2 parts of that process. There's the first one is identifying the properties that can be disposed of, and that obviously is going to take some time because the city owns thousands of pieces of property. The second part of it is the actual process of disposing of them. And I think that's where I'm most concerned, is that we just get bogged down into traditional city processes, and it's like, okay, consider it like you're the private sector, and say, you know what, I got a contract to purchase this property, and what do I got to do to get rid of it? I mean, let's just move it through. So, the other thing would be, would it be realistic to have, any analysis or comparison to what other similarly sized cities do and what their budgets are? And
Yes, perfectly reasonable. It is hard to get an apples to apples comparison.
Totally.
For example, we are both a city and a county. We are the only city with responsibility for the interstate highways within the city, and state routes. No, sorry, not interstate highways, all
State-
of them, but some
state
of them,
routes.
state highways, within our boundaries. There are different ways that jurisdictions issue bonds. Like some do it one bond issue that lasts for 10 years, and they budget and spend down over 10 years. So there are a lot of things that make it hard, but we can try to put something together.
The
And
reason
find some
for it
benchmarks.
is to talk with our state legislators.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Is to say, here are the unique things that Baltimore City is dealing with
Mm-hmm.
that our sister cities aren't necessarily dealing with. Specifically, we're responsible for all the state highway maintenance
Mm-hmm.
and improvements within our jurisdictional limits. So that we can impress upon them, when you're looking to give, grants and so on and so forth, we should be always first on your mind, period. Okay. The last thing is on your chart for future years, you had special projects, set-asides. You have almost $19.1 million set aside for surplus school demolition. And what I would suggest to you is, and fortunately that's in 27 and 28, what I would suggest to you is, if you can figure out how to dispose of those schools and throw that cost onto the purchaser, then you can save $19.1 million and just say, okay, you know what, as part of your acquisition, you're responsible for, if you want to reuse the school, great. If you want to demo it, great. It's up to you. We're not spending any more money on this. So, but again, thank you very much for a great job, as always. Is there, with no more questions for Ms. Ahern, is there anybody here from the planning department who's in the audience who would like to speak on this? All right, seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Yeah, exactly. That's right. Is there anyone here from the public, specifically Mr. French, who would like to speak on this? Seeing none. With that, do we have any questions, comments, deliberations from the commission? If not, do we have a motion?
Just had a quick question.
Yes, please. I'm sorry.
And I don't know if we already discussed this, but the funding for the Solo Gibbs Phase 2 improvements was accelerated, and then the funding from Robert C. Marshall and Lillian Jones Recreational Center was moved back. Could you just talk about the reasoning behind that? I don't have an issue with that. I was just wondering.
I'm going to defer to the director on that.
Yeah, it's a very complicated answer, which has to do with when projects are coming online. In other words, through design and construction, and with the additional viewpoint or perspective of spending ARPA money within the right time frame. So Rec and Park has a big job to do, lining up design, construction, and ARPA funding, and getting projects that are ready to go now into the ARPA queue, and then,
Okay.
yeah, it's basically that.
Thanks.
All right, with that, is there a motion? Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve?
Second?
Thank you, Commissioner Collins. Thank you, Commissioner Allen. Mr. Secretary, will you call roll?
Robin Allen,
Approve?
Marcia Collins,
Approve.
the Honorable Eric Costello,
Approve.
Talib Horn,
Approve.
Claudia Jolin,
Approve.
Doug McCoach,
Approve.
Justin Williams,
Approve.
Eric Stevenson,
Approve.
and Sean Davis.
Approve. Thank you very much, Kristen. Our next agenda item.
Next agenda item is City Council Bill Number 24-0494, Chesapeake Bay Critical Area Overlay Zoning District and prohibited uses in the 1st,
Thank you.
10th, 11th,
I
and
missed that.
12th
It's right here.
councilmatic
But
districts.
Somehow that passed.
Grace Hanson will present.
Ms. Henson?
Great, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Grace Hanson. I am the coastal planner for the city. So I manage development in the critical area as well as the coastal floodplain. So today we're going to be talking about Council Bill 240494, which deals with prohibited uses in the Chesapeake Bay critical area. So this was introduced by Councilmember Costello at the request of the National Aquarium last week. And essentially, this allows the city to permit certain uses within the 100-foot buffer within the critical area. So here is a map of the critical area within the Inner Harbor. So it is just the Chesapeake Bay, so tidally influenced waters. And this bill is just allowing prohibited uses, current prohibited uses in the IDA, which is the industrial area, and that is the pink you see as well as the yellow. So those are the only applicable areas that we are talking about today. And just to reiterate, the Chesapeake Bay critical area is 1,000 feet landward of the mean high water. And the Chesapeake Bay 100-foot buffer is part of that, but it's the immediate area from the high water line to 100 feet back. And that's where we have stricter requirements and afforestation rates and mitigation rates. So Baltimore City was required to develop a critical area management program, which we call the CAMP manual, in 2002. This is a state requirement, and it has been updated several times since. And most recently, well, not most recently, but in July 1st, 2013, the state came out with language in code, so it's known as 16104, where the city can opt in to allow certain non-water dependent structures within the 100-foot buffer. At the time, the city chose not to opt in because they did not want the waterfront to become privatized or, have a bunch of development that would inhibit people's views of the waterfront. But after discussion with the state for the past several months, we decided that the city would like to move forward with this. So again, this aligns with the state's requirement to have a CAMP manual. So currently, under our regulations, no structure that is non-water dependent is allowed in the critical area buffer, so that 100-foot buffer. This prohibits certain structures like awnings, for example, for shade, and other prohibited uses. This language does not, or let me reiterate that. This language or the code still applies. So things that are not allowed in the 100-foot buffer will still apply. So those are like storage facilities or certain production facilities, hazardous material, that all applies. This is strictly for structures, and it has requirements that the state the state has imposed and we must abide by. So like I said, again, this is in the regulations section 16104 in the state. And the non-water dependent structures has a bit of a flexible definition, and it ultimately goes to the Critical Area Commission at the state level for their approval. But under our terms, this is a temporary or permanent structure by reason of intrinsic nature, use, or operation, does not require location in state or private wetlands. So going back to that map earlier, the intensely developed area is only where this applies. So that means this has already been developed, and it's not, we only have a few natural portions of the Inner Harbor left, and so this would not count towards that. Some state requirements that we must abide by for this is 1,000 square foot area maximum coverage per project and 18-foot height requirements. This also must be approved by local planning and zoning authorities, and every project in the 100-foot buffer goes to the State Critical Area Commission for final approval. Also, the project must enhance public access to the state wetlands if applicable. So So like I said in the last slide, 18 feet is the maximum requirement unless the project's located at a marina. In those cases, that's typically a water-dependent use. And up to 1,000 square feet in total area, that's per project. And this also aligns with Article 8, 1808.4 in the state code. So that also would allow small-scale renewable energy systems that also will have several restrictions in place. And we are following the state code pretty much exactly. The only things we are differing from is in terms of language because of the way our code is written. Otherwise, it's completely aligned with the state critical area commission. So in terms of how this will benefit users in the Inner Harbor is these shade structures will allow sensitive groups to enjoy the waterfront. So the project that brought this whole discussion up is the aquarium's proposal for floating wetlands. And this is an educational tool, and because they want people to access this all times of the year, they want shade structures on those wetlands so that vulnerable populations, or not, sorry, not the wetlands, the docks there, to view the wetlands so that people can access it in all times, all weather. And right now that's not allowed in our code, but we would like all groups to have that accessibility. But yes, also going back to, we don't want the waterfront to be completely privatized. The legislation is written so that the waterfront will not become completely privatized, as we've made this a major concern to the state, and they informed us that that will not happen under this. So our recommendation is to approve Council Bill 240494, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Ms. Hanson. Starting off with Councilman Costello. Any questions for Ms. Hanson?
No, thank you for the quick turnaround. I really
Yeah.
appreciate it.
Commissioner Collins.
I just want to make sure I fully understand how this is going to work. If this bill is passed and in our code, you're saying any structure that would be in this 100-foot area would still have to go before a state entity?
Yes. So I'll pull up that map of the critical area again. But so right now in our code, if there's any disturbance within the 100-foot buffer, those project proposals must go to the State Critical Area Commission for review, just to ensure that it aligns with the city's code and it's not anything that is prohibited in our code or the state
Even if it was water dependent or?
Yes, correct.
Okay.
So that is encapsulated in this legislation. That still applies.
Okay, and just the other issue is how do we have the ability to deal with the clutter, potential for clutter?
Yeah, so that is a question that we've been working on with the state as well. You know, we don't want these to all, you know, we don't want the promenade to have all these shade structures. So that's something we've been working with legislative reference as well. So right now it's the 1,000 square feet per project, but the term is a little loose in the state definition. So that could be per parcel or per, property, per project. Do you have?
You have approval authority.
Yes, but I have everything must go to the city for approval and the state for approval. And then also because this requires planning approval as well, it can always be, deemed this, we don't want it to occur. If that makes sense.
So in other words, you would have the ability to make a decision
Yes.
based on a clutter,
Yes.
for lack of a better word, clutter factor?
Yeah. I think so.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Commissioner McCoach.
Yes, hey, Grace. We were corresponding earlier about this.
Mike, please.
And I just wanted to ask you one question about that 1,000 square foot limit.
Yeah.
In the example that you shared with me, the notion of the floating wetlands, those guys have to be between maybe 20 by 20 or something like that to be reasonable.
Yeah.
They have to be a certain area. Do you think that 1,000 square foot limit would require them to submit for multiple projects because there will be 6 or 8 or 10 of these things?
So we have go ahead. Sorry.
So are you talking about the wetlands?
Yes, yes.
They're in the water, so this is,
So this is just the structures on top. So this is strictly the awnings or the shade structures.
Okay.
So
the actual
the,
wetlands, if it's in the water, that's regulated by a variety of other stuff.
Yeah, that's,
It's on the landward side of the mean high water.
yeah, so this has been, the aquariums project has been working with Maryland Department of the Environment for that approval. Ours is just focusing on the structures on top of those piers. But also, going back to that 1,000 square foot total area, they do have to change, or they did change their design a little bit because those awnings were just a hair over 1,000 square feet. So they had to manipulate it a little bit to be within that threshold.
Great, thank you.
Deputy Mayor Williams.
Where did the 1,000 feet square foot provision come from?
Great question. It came from the state requirement. So it's like 20 acres, I believe, is the like threshold, but that is a state requirement, is the critical area buffer, or sorry, critical area is 1,000 square feet.
No.
Oh,
Two separate.
oh, sorry, the total area.
Square feet of area.
The total area. So that's also a state requirement. That is the highest amount permitted. And because we wanted to align with the Critical Area Commission's language, and this will go to the Critical Area Commission for approval, we wanted to match that language as closely as possible.
I
So
mean, think about it.
that's where it came
a 20
from.
by 50 structure. It's not a small structure.
So it's in the critical area management,
Or camp manual.
the acronym.
It's not in our camp now. The
Yes.
whole purpose of this is to get it approved so that it can become in our camp. But the actual 1,000 feet reg, 1,000 square foot reg, is from the state.
Yes. So that's the maximum permitted. So if the city wanted to, we could have a stricter requirement. But like I said, we were aligning with the state code at this time.
Okay, yeah, I'm trying to find it, but I don't know if we'll be able to. I guess, well, just to voice my other thought that this should be considered okay, like an awning, if we accept the proposition that a pier is okay to be in the wetland, in the water, in the buffer, then the awning on top of it should be allowed to, but that's not, I guess.
So, interesting, that's an interesting point, if I can build on that. If I have an awning on a building, that's part of the building structure, not part of the buffer
Correct.
infringement.
Yes,
This is a separate standalone structure.
I believe so.
I think it's, well, I mean.
Yeah.
It's not going to
Yeah.
the 20 feet underground, under the water.
No, what I'm saying is, like, look at the aquarium right now. When you walk up to the aquarium, there's the ticket booth and whatnot. There's an awning that you can get under the shade. It's within 100 feet, but it's physically connected to the building, right?
So
Yeah, it is.
all buildings that are within the 100-foot buffer, or even in the critical area 1,000-foot buffer, they have to be approved by the state by Department of Planning, as well as the State Critical Area Commission. So buildings in general all have to be approved, and then this is saying the awnings is allowed as well.
Awnings or shade structures?
Awning/shade
Because
structures.
an awning to me means it's physically attached to a building.
Yeah, okay, shade structures are temporary or permanent roof structure.
I'm sorry, I might have screwed up your.
Well, no, not quite. I mean, I think it's, this seemed like silly interpretation from the state, but.
Gee, when does that ever happen?
But let me just offer, in working down in Anne Arundel County, you can't put a covered structure on top of a pier. That prohibition exists.
I mean, it sounds like there's precedent, I mean, that
Yeah.
led to this, or gazebos or something, but this feels like if you're going to allow people to enjoy, the proposition, people are beyond the pier to look at whatever.
Whatever.
They should be able to,
Be undercover.
yeah.
Vice Chair Stevenson. Any questions?
Yeah, I'm looking for I'm looking at the bill now. I'm just looking for the specific, like, language change, trying to understand. I understand the example of the awning, but I guess I'm trying to understand what is and isn't allowed now and what specifically we're changing to allow for the awnings.
So currently, we don't have that in our code. So this would be adding a completely additional section into our code, because even though it's not prohibited in,
Everything
or
that's
doesn't
highlighted
say
is.
this is not allowed currently, it's because we haven't opted in, the state doesn't allow us to even grant like a variance for this, for example. So we need to add this section from the state into our language. So nothing exactly in our language is changing, we're just adding something in.
So
Yes,
anything
the critical
like
area-
state bill,
oh,
if it's
actually,
in
it could
caps,
be
it's an
both.
addition. If it's in parens, it's a deletion.
Yeah.
Those kind of, I mean, that's how they do those.
And the variance would be a critical area variance, not a zoning.
1,000 feet and the 18-foot height are not in here. Those are regs. Those aren't law.
Is this the
That's the bill.
bill? Okay, yeah, so it references 8-1808.4 where everything is referenced in the state code.
So as the regulations can be modified, you know, within the department and so on and
Yes.
so forth. And so they're not in that law. Because if they were to say, if somebody was to come out and say, well, now it can be 1,500 square feet, you don't have to go back in and change the law. You just want to change the regs, which they would be prepared to do, or 18 to 20 feet or whatever.
They would have to go, if they wanted to do that, they would have to go to the state to change their language.
Yep. But if the state changes their language and it's applicable to all,
Yes.
we don't have to change ours.
Thank you.
We don't have to change the law. We just have to
Yes.
change the regs.
Yeah.
So I guess my question is just what else could be built under this?
So not much. That is something that was under our, like in our discussions, because right now dwelling units are prohibited in the 100-foot buffer and they will be prohibited moving forward. So those uses, you know, there's not much that can be built in the 100-foot buffer because it is such a sensitive area. I can send you all a copy of the critical area management program that outlines what is allowed and what is not allowed. That can do a much better job describing it than I can up here.
And so prior to this legislation, nothing could be built?
No, not nothing, but it all has to be approved by the state. And so that everything still has to be approved by the state.
Nothing non-water dependent.
So it could be nothing non-water dependent except approval by the state could. But the awnings and the shade structures are not allowed under any circumstances currently.
So,
It's a very interesting piece of legislation because it's talking about temporary or permanent roof on non-water dependent structures.
that's what I was going for. What's the thing that's stopping this from being built right now that we're removing? That's what I wasn't clear on.
Yeah.
So it's something about roofs.
Yes.
So that is actually interesting because it raises the point you're putting a huge, impermeable 1,000 square foot thing in the critical area.
It's already there. It's on top of something that's already gonna be there.
A dock isn't impermeable the same way that a roof is.
But a dock's not part of the buffer. Because the dock's not on the mean high water line.
This is a relieving platform.
What was that?
This is a relieving platform, correct?
Yes, so the floating dock, so it's also, there are several definitions of docks and piers that the Critical Area Commission follows, that we follow as a city, as well as Maryland Department of the Environment. And so there are prohibited uses, like we said, the dwelling units, and there are, I can't remember them off the top of my head, there are several that aren't allowed on piers, and those would still apply. It just, we think of the aquarium, or if there is a trail that wants viewpoints in Middle Branch, for example, they can have the shade structures on top of it.
Sure. I guess, we first started talking about shade structures. I'm thinking, fabric sales and things like that. And then you started saying 1,000 square feet, and like that's an amphitheater.
20 by 50 is 1,000 square feet. Which could be big. But then,
Yeah.
what happens underneath there, the use is regulated. And, here's a weird thing. When the critical areas law was created in 86, 87, whenever the hell it was, the vast majority of our waterfront was already developed. So, we're not like all the counties, Anne Arundel. Well, 1986, I remember working on projects when this thing came around, and we're like going, what the hell do we do? A lot of that was undeveloped. It's very, very different. So, I liken what, the deputy mayor said is, yeah, I'm putting up a shade structure on something that's already impermeable. So what am I, from an environmental standpoint, what am I doing?
I'm good.
Okay. Yes.
I have a forgive me if you covered this, totally somewhat related trivia question. Our total mileage of coastline in the city, I read the other day, is 36 miles. Is that accurate?
No,
Yeah, I don't think so.
that would be a
could-
lot. That would be a hell of a lot.
Well, the city's only 10 by 10, so, but I didn't know with zigzagging.
Measure the zigzags.
The promenade is 5, right? The promenade is 5 from Key Highway to
You know,
10th Street.
I don't know, you may be right.
So that's not enough,
Could be
right?
right.
Yeah, I'm actually looking.
Yeah, I was like,
How far to go?
I'm not sure of that exact number. I know it's written in our
Is there
camp manual.
someone that could look that up at a later date? Don't need that right now.
Yeah.
Completely irrelevant.
Yeah.
Just read it yesterday or
Yeah.
the day before. Thank you so much.
Uh-huh.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Are you teeing up Mr. Williams for his next appearance on Jeopardy?
What is, I need to get the answer first before I do that.
Right.
Our DPW says 59 miles.
59 miles, wow. Okay. I'm shooting for 60. Commissioner Horn.
No questions.
Commissioner Allen?
No questions, thank you.
Commissioner Jones?
Yes. Can you repeat again, because I think I missed it, the areas to which this would affect?
Yes.
Thank you.
So this is in the IDA, which is the intensely developed area. That's defined by state code is IDA. And then Baltimore City breaks this into 2 categories. We have the waterfront industrial area and the waterfront revitalization area. And that is applicable for this legislation. So red and yellow, yes. So I was going to say it's that orangey red as well as the yellow. The other areas are not allowed for this legislation will not be applicable in those areas because the green areas are resource conservation areas. So those are sensitive. That's our natural habitat that we'd like to preserve. So we don't want to allow that in there. And also the state code does not allow that at the state level. So if we wanted to allow those structures, that would need to be a state legislation change.
So we have red and yellow that this is affecting.
Correct.
currently. Okay. Second question I have is in the legislation, it says water-dependent facilities means land uses, and then going down to land use, excitingly and interestingly, it says public beaches and water-oriented recreation areas. And so with that, what for me, my immediate idea is water-oriented recreation areas means some sort of sports use or maybe privatization or bolo sports or any of that nature. Is that an idea that already exists and takes
Yes.
place?
So under current code, if that is a water-dependent use, they are allowed to have those structures within the buffer. This would allow the non-water dependent non-water dependent uses to have that structure, but all depending on if it gets approved by the city and approved by the state.
Perfect, thank you.
Yep. What? Oh, yeah, and boat ramp too. Yeah. Yes.
I only have one question. My only concern regarding this is the division between project and parcel or
Yeah.
property. I think you've got it right now in terms of project to allow yourself flexibility because you are the authority, the approval authority, and the state is. So the aquarium comes in and they have 1,000-foot shade structure on the dock, on the promenade to provide shade, makes perfect sense. As those wetlands begin to expand, and they say, well, let's put another one on the other side of the aquarium. Okay, if you have it, if it's property, they would be prohibited from doing that. If it's project, it's possible that they do that, but they still got to get your.
Exactly.
But I think you need to watch how that's being applied because
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of developers out there who.
Yeah, we agree the same. We don't want, hundreds of projects coming in with 1,000 square foot.
Right, so.
Yeah, and it would have to get through the state as well, so.
I recognize that. But I think you've got it right.
Yes.
I'm just saying, my only caution is, to watch that.
Yeah, thank you.
If there are no further questions for Ms. Hanson from the commission, is there anyone here from the public? Mr. French, who would like to speak on behalf of this? All right. With that, we will close the public hearing. Questions, comments, deliberations from the commission? And we are a recommending body on this. This is going back before the council for its ultimate adoption and approval. Do we have a motion? Man, everybody's really quiet today.
Move approval.
Thank you,
Second.
Commissioner Coach, thank you. Mr. Dolan, Mr. Secretary, will you call roll?
Robin Allen,
Approve.
Marcia Collins,
Approve.
Eric Costello,
Approve.
Philippe Horn,
Approve.
Claudia Jolin,
Approve.
Doug McCoach,
Approve.
Justin Williams.
Approve.
Eric Stevenson.
Approve.
Sean Davis.
Approve. Is there any other questions, comments, or items for the agenda or for the commission? Motion to, John, adjourn, thank you.
Second.
I was gonna say retire, but no, Mr. French is already retired. All right, thank you all. We'll see you on the 28th at noon.